Good afternoon. Welcome, Professor Zazzaro. Welcome, everyone. It's noon in Jeddah. It's 35 degrees outside. It's a good time for a cultural heritage lecture. I am Laurent Sapio. I live and work in Saudi Arabia since 10 years. I'm an archaeologist working at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. I'm doing some research and some cultural outreach. In this framework, I've been organizing their cultural heritage lecture series since a few years. Because of the sanitary situation, today it's becoming a webinar series accessible from everywhere in the world. I'm really glad that something positive could emerge from the situation. The Cultural Heritage event series, aims to increase awareness about the unique cultural and archaeological heritage of Saudi Arabia. It covers a wide range of topics, unveiling the history of the region or highlighting the latest strategies to preserve this heritage. But sometimes we will also make some digressions and have a special edition. Actually, it will be the case for the next lecture to be announced at the end of this webinar. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A session. You can ask questions anytime using the Q&A tab, and they will be answered at the end by Professor Zazzaro or maybe by some specialist. I know that some of the team members of the mission are here with us today. Before we start, please, could you fill a short poll? It's two easy, simple questions that I'm putting now on. It's for me to understand what is the composition of the audience. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So Chiara, if you want to, I will stop sharing my screen. No. And Chiara, you can launch your...
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. It's a great pleasure for me today to welcome Chiara Zazzaro, Associate Professor of Maritime Archaeology at the University of Napoli, L'Orientale. Research interests concern ancient navigation and contacts between the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean, but also ancient and traditional boats, ports, and activities related to the maritime and underwater environment, with a particular reference to the Red Sea and the Western Indian Ocean. For two missions in 2015 and 16, she co-directed the joint underwater project of the Saudi Commission for Tourism and National Heritage and the L'Orientale University offshore Lajj in the Red Sea. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, Chiara. The floor and the audience are yours.
Thank you, Laurence. Thank you to the King Abdullah University for this invitation. I'm honored to virtually be here. I say hello to colleagues from Kaust, which are connected today, and to everybody else. Hope you are all safe and in good health. So I've been teaching online for my University L'Orientale since the beginning of the emergency in March, but this is my first online conference, so please forgive me in case something goes wrong. So the reason why I'm here today to talk about Red Sea shipwrecks and navigation in the 18th century goes back to 2015, when me and my colleague Romulo Loreto were invited by the Saudi Commission of Tourism and National Heritage to start a collaborative underwater survey of a sector of the Saudi Arabian Red Sea. So we decided to focus, so we decided to focus our attention on an astonishing 18th century shipwreck, which was discovered a few years before, 60 miles offshore the town of Umm Lajj. Since the beginning, we realized that the shipwreck had very much in common with the two other shipwrecks found in the Red Sea, one of which was excavated several years before by my Egyptian colleagues, Mohamed Abdelmajid and Ahmad Khalil, and my mentor, Cheryl Ward. So if we consider that archaeological underwater research in the Red Sea is still very limited for many reasons, it is quite surprising that the three best preserved wooden shipwrecks in Red Sea are very similar to each other and dating to the same period. This gives us the opportunity to have a very interesting picture of what was going on in the Red Sea in the 18th century in terms of maritime trade, economy, religion, and cultural relationships. In this period, the Ottoman Empire ruled in Egypt and part of the Red Sea. Ottoman ships operated in a dense and articulated commercial network that connected the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean through Alexandria. Large sailing ships were owned by Egyptian merchants, by the Ottoman government itself, or by religious institutions. During this period, Ottoman restricted the access of European ships to Red Sea ports, so European ships would instead reach the Indian Ocean, circumnavigating Africa. It is therefore a period of important economic competition in the context of an established global market which involved three continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia. Of course, these trade dynamics have been widely studied by historians, but still the discovery of these three shipwrecks gives us space for new historical narratives based on the archaeological evidence. The three ships wrecked in the northern part of the Red Sea. Their cargo of precious porcelain, silverware, spices, coffee, and exotic products suggests that they were on their return route to Egypt, intended to reach the market of Alexandria. So I will present the three shipwrecks, then I will try to combine the information we got from them in order to resume the significance of their discovery within the historical context. So first of the three of them is the Sharm el-Sheikh wreck. It was discovered in a military harbor in Sharm el-Sheikh at the southern tip of Sinai. In 1969, during the Israeli occupation of Egypt, the Undersea Excavation Society conducted excavation there for some weeks. According to the interpretation of the archaeologists, the ship sank while it was at the dock, so very close to the shore, after a fire. The absence of personal belongings on board suggested that the crew managed to reach the shore. Despite the ship sank near the shore and in shallow water, large part of the cargo was still there, so was not recovered by the crew. Archaeologists found nearly 1,000 earthenware jars for liquids, which are a type which is commonly known in the region, the Red Sea region, as kulal, and are characterized by incised geometric patterns and molded decoration, save at the base of the neck and lids to protect the liquid. So toward the stern of the boat, the archaeologists found remains of the kitchen with the two large storage jars and glazed pottery and the cabin. Probably part of the precious porcelain cargo was already recovered at the time of the wreckage, as only a dozen cups were found by archaeologists, including this fragment showing the peony motifs, which suggested the dating for the shipwreck to the second quarter of the 18th century. From the fieldwork notes, the ships appear quite big, 37 meters in length and 13 meters large, with planks nailed to frames, ceiling planks, we can clearly see in the draft, are visible, and some massive timbers are visible in these pictures in the inner planking, which could be interpreted as killstones and sister killstones. Wood analysis revealed that the keel and frames were made of pine, while a couple of blocks that were also found within this context were made of ash and oak wood. Let's move to the Sadana. The Sadana Island shipwrecks was found in the 1990s offshore the northern Egyptian coast of the Red Sea near Sadana, to the north of Safaga. From 1995 to 1998, a team of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities and of the American Institute for Nautical Archaeology started a project of excavation here. According to the archaeologists, the ship probably broke free of anchors slightly north of the fringing reef linking Sadana Island to the shore and hit the reef, then sank parallel to the reef at about 30-meter depth. The cargo was similar to that of Sharm el-Sheikh wreck, and it included earthenware jugs for liquids, 1,000 Chinese porcelain cups, and some dishes. Sediment analysis allowed the interpretation of the so-called invisible cargo, the organic cargo that included spices, coffee from the Hadramaut, and other organic remains. Other finds include silverware, pipes, tobacco kits, incense burners. Most importantly, this time archaeologists also found personal belongings of the crew, which could be recovered at the moment, couldn't be recovered, of course, at the moment of wreckage. One of the silver vessels bear an inscription which dated the shipwreck to the 1765. The cargo also included 40 zila, which are large storage jars of 2 different types, which were positioned at midship. So the ship fell onto its starboard side on a slope. So this caused the spreading of the cargo and of some ship remains. Despite that, shell reports suggested that the ship originally measured 50 meters in length and had a massive architecture, similar to that of Sharm, but larger. Let's move now to Umm Lajj. So around 2008, a group of sport divers discovered the 3rd wreck. It was known as the Chinese pottery wreck by the divers, and it was a diving spot before the Ministry of Culture declared the area protected and forbidden recreational diving there. In 2009, the shipwreck was featured in a BBC documentary film, The Frankincense Trail, and kept the attention of the wider public and archaeologists worldwide. The wreck is located 60 miles offshore the town of Umm Lajj, so it was renamed the Umm Lajj shipwreck. We are here circa 230 miles to the north of Jeddah, the main port of Mecca, and 130 miles to the north of Yanbu. As we have seen from the previous sketch, this one, the shipwreck lies here, lies very close to the reef, 22 meters from the reef. It is an isolated reef which lies between the Shebaira reef, the main Shebaira reef, and the island of Hassani here. As we can observe from the nautical chart, this area comprises several groups of both continuous reefs and scattered dangerous reefs. According to the Red Sea pilot, there is a navigational channel along the Shebaira reef, which was suitable for the small boats and was considered dangerous for large ships. The nearby island, always according to the Red Sea pilot, provided in the past water supply, sheep, wood, and small quantity of water from wells. It was an important stopover for ships sailing between Suez and the port of Hijaz. Considering the fact that our ship was navigating towards north, we would wonder why the ship stopped on an isolated reef in the middle of nowhere instead of having a stopover in the nearby island of Asani. So yeah, the wreck is all around here. Yeah. So it is possible that the ship probably found shelter for a bad weather stopover for the strong north and northwest wind, and then subsequently wrecked. Or perhaps the ship didn't see the reef and accidentally hit it. In 2015 and 2017, a team of the University of Napoli L'Orientale and the Saudi Commission for Tourism and National Heritage conducted 2 short seasons of underwater survey on this shipwreck. Being far from the coast, the team had to stay on the site on a cruise boat for a week each field season. Working conditions were ideal, both for the weather, calm, sunny, no strong winds. The water temperature was 22, visibility excellent, and we were also in very good company. The wreck lies 22 meters below the sea surface. Part of the hull is visible, in particular the massive longitudinal carpentry, which we see in the middle, and the frame. Most of them were partially covered by corals on the starboard side, suggesting that the ship may have wrecked laying on the port side. But the most striking evidence on the site is a mound of water jars which accumulated in the stern when the ship sank. They are cemented together by the calcium carbonate, and it would be impossible to remove any of these jars without breaking them. In terms of surveying methods, first thing we did, we georeferenced the area, we positioned the shipwreck. Then we proceeded with the 3D photogrammetry, which was not easy to achieve at all. Despite the clarity of the water, there were many fishes moving around, soft corals moving with the currents. And it took us 2 seasons to accomplish a satisfying result. We were particularly concerned to get a good results for the 3D photogrammetry of the jars mound in order to possibly study the jars from the 3D model once at home. So what we did, we first cleaned the surface of the jars using simple brushes in order to better show the incised geometric patterns and the molded decoration. And the results was quite good, as we can see from the post-cleaning photographs. So we then proceed with the 3D photogrammetry around the mound. And the results, yeah, was quite, satisfying. So this allowed Elisa Terminiello, a master's student at the L'Orientale University at that time, to conduct a detailed study on the mound, on the 3D models of the mound. She managed to count 1,359 jars. She estimated 2,000 more jars below the surface layer. And she managed to identify 292 different types of jars that could be classified as types, non-types. The jars were then digitalized in different colors according to the different types. The typology was based on the variation of shape and decoration. The dimension vary in length from 20 to 50, but the majority was between 20-30 centimeters in length, in height, in average. The majority of the assemblage was constituted of Umm Lall jars, which were also the majority for the Sadana and the Sharm wreck. Then 19% Dorak bottles, and 8% of large jars. The Umm Lall are characterized by an ovoid body, elongated neck, a filter in between the neck and body for the protection of the liquid. The assemblage also included large jars with handle and spout, bottles, the Dorak, different types, and jugs, and coffee jugs. So from this table, we can see a relative consistency in the cargo of jars for the three shipwrecks. Kulal are the most common type present in the assemblages of the three shipwrecks, as well as Dorak, although there are more numerous in the Sadana wreck. Coffee jugs, while large jars are common in Umm Lajj and in Sadana, coffee jugs are present only in the Umm Lajj shipwreck. Of course, we have to take into account that these percentages are based on limited data, so we don't have the complete pictures of the three cargoes, because some information are still lacking. We didn't conducted analysis of the wear, although Lisa suggests that the wear from the Kular jars of the Umm Lajj shipwreck is similar to that of Sadana. And despite we know that there were centers of production in Cairo and Kenya for this type of jars and in Damascus, we suggest that these jars were produced in the area of the main ports of Jeddah and Mocha in the southern Red Sea, because of the consistency with the rest of the cargo. As in Sadana, the central part of the ship was occupied by large storage jars, the Zila, of which only few were visible on the site when we first conducted our survey there. Perhaps some of them have been looted before our arrival. Toward the stern, the steam area of the wreck, we also notice the presence of metalware, like in Sadana, glass bottles, also present in Sadana, and ceramic pipes of the Ottoman type, very similar in the shape to the pipes of Sadana, found on the Sadana shipwreck. As we didn't not start the excavation yet on this shipwreck, we didn't sample the sediment yet, so we know very little about organic cargo, the invisible cargo. We only recorded one coconut husk and some food remains from small animals which were possibly consumed on board. The most precious part of the cargo was constituted, as in the case of Sadana and Sharm el-Sheikh, in an assemblage of porcelain and coffee cups. A major concentration was found at port side quarter of the ship in this area. So, being quite a resistant material, part of the porcelain assemblage was taken out of the water for a preliminary documentation. Then pottery analysis was then conducted on the basis of field notes, photographs and drawings by my colleague Chiara Visconti from l'Orientale University. So Chiara reported that the ceramic recovered so far consists almost entirely of blue and white wares with a lime alkaline glaze, used with unglazed blue, painting in cobalt ores. Represented shapes are footed balls, 4 to 5 centimeters high, with slightly everted rim, and small straight-sided cups. The decorative motifs consist of floral, figurative, and symbolic representation. Unlike the Sadana collection, the Umm Lajj cargo contained pieces of porcelain decorated with human figures. You can see here 2 monks. The only decorative pattern which was specifically destined to the Middle Eastern market is a circular motif within a flame. Similar design, which is this one, is presented on Topkapi cups from Istanbul, and have been dated between the late 17th century and the mid 18th century. A few fragments presented the decoration with a panel reserved in white on a blue glazed ground, which is a technique spread as early as the beginning of the 18th century. A similar technique was used for 3 porcelain cups with quatrefoil panels extruded from the brown glaze coating here. This type is often referred to as Batavia, the old name for Jakarta, where the Dutch East India Company had its Indonesian outpost. So this type of decoration spread as early as the mid-17th century and remained in fashion for about a century. Several caps are decorated on the exterior with motifs of pines, you can see here, pine trees, and on the interior with the bands running around the rim and at the base. The same decorative scheme, the so-called blue pine pattern, is depicted on tens of thousands of pieces from the porcelain cargo of the Geldermalsen, a Dutch East Indian Company ship, which wrecked in 1752 off the coast of the Lingga archipelago in Indonesia, rediscovered then in 1985 by Asher. So preliminary porcelain analysis suggests the dating for the shipwreck of Umm Lajj to the mid-18th century and gives us also an insight into the complexity of the porcelain trade and market at this time. Let's move now to the ship architecture. Only part of the hull below the waterline survived. The ship most likely led on its port side, as I said before, as we can see emerging frames only on the starboard side. The visible remains of the wood measure 36 meters in length and 9 meters in width. From the orthorectified image of the 3D model, we produce a descriptive map of the architecture. We can see here the axial internal carpentry in black. We distinguish 3 central longitudinal elements, which may be interpreted as the keelson and the 2 sister keelsons. They were quite large and heavy, and somehow probably similar to these 2 elements visible in the Sharm, in one of the pictures depicting the Sharm wreck. Most of the frames, as we said, were recorded on the starboard side. They measure 18 in width and 20 centimeters in thickness, and were spaced 41, 42 centimeters center to center, while some of them were paired couple half frames, as we can see these 2 here. The inspection of the hull revealed the hull planks here. They were better preserved on the port side. They seem to be better preserved on the port side, still protected by the sediment. They measure in width 22, 23 centimeters and 5 centimeters in thickness. In the seam, we can see the seam is slightly beveled, maybe suggesting that there was some sort of caulking material inside. Hull planks are nailed to the frames with square iron nails, which measure 1.5 centimeters in average, and are spaced on the frames between 10 to 20 centimeters. On the north side of the jar mounds, we notice the presence of some planking, which we interpret as a possible remains of a deck. So the jars might have been arranged below this deck. Yeah, here's the image of this wooden assemblage. Then we took some wood samples from various elements of the carpentry and in different parts of the hull. Wood analysis were conducted by Rainer Gerisch, who identified 4 samples from frame as pine, while 1 sample from the keelson as oak. So they are all Mediterranean species, probably from the Eastern Mediterranean. This suggests that the ship was built in one of the Suez shipyards, which are mentioned in historical sources, and maybe follow the Mediterranean type of construction. This is a quick comparative table on the architecture of the 3 ships, showing that the original structure of the Umm Lajj wreck was slightly smaller than the Sadana ship, and more similar in size with the Sharm ship. The estimated length for the Sadana is 50 meters, while for Sharm and Umm Lajj might have been 40, 45 maximum meters in length. So this raises the questions, what type of ships were sailing in the Red Sea in this period? We have historical accounts and iconography showing us the presence of both Mediterranean ships and Indian ships at the same time in the Red Sea. Which, as we can see in this in the Gujarati map, showing possible like Indian Ocean ships, Indian ships with the Latin sails and square sails from more Mediterranean type of ship. A similar difference can be noticed in this depiction from the European traveler Kaust's neighbor of ships in the port of Jeddah and the port of Yanbu. And as well, we can see Latin sails and squares rigged ships. Historical sources also mention 50 Egyptian ships shuttling up and down the Red Sea, quite large, up to 1,000 tons in capacity in the 17th century. And then they decreased to a number of 15 in the 18th century. Many of them probably shipwrecked. In fact, they are often described as poorly built, long and deep, difficult to maneuver, and even nearly impossible to tack. This means that they were probably forced to operate in the period from October to May, when occasionally southern winds would prevail also in the northern part of the Red Sea for 4 or 5 days each time. In any case, the northbound voyage for these ships was estimated at 2 months against 20 days to sail from Suez to Jeddah. So all this determined changing in the second half of the 18th century. And Ottoman documents attest that the replacing of existing ships, large ships, with more resistant, reliable and cheap Indian ships available in the southern ports of the Red Sea. And then the replacement also of large ships with smaller sized ships is also attested in historical sources. Concerning the cargo, we notice a similar disposition in the Sadana and Umm Lajj shipwrecks. We notice also a similar composition for the Umm Lajj and the Sharm wreck. So there are some similarities, some differences between the 3 shipwrecks. Historical sources attest that those ships carried food provision from Mecca, sailing from Suez to Jeddah, so on the way towards south. While on the way back, the cargo carried by these ships demonstrated that the Egyptian-Ottoman trade involved not only mass products like water jars from the southern Red Sea, but also luxury products from the east. These luxury products were not limited to the Islamic market, but were competing in the European markets with the products carried by the East Indian companies. So we can state that the Egyptian trade included 3 continents at this time. Concerning the route, of course, the fact that these ships contain Chinese porcelain and other Indian Ocean products should not necessarily indicate a direct navigation to the east for various reasons, among which the absence on the 3 shipwrecks so far of weapons on board, as suggested by Sherry Ward while discussing the case of the Sadana wreck. So these ships wouldn't have afforded a long voyage towards a safe voyage in the Indian Ocean without weapons on board. The 3 shipwrecks are more likely to only have shuttled up and down the Red Sea from Jeddah to Suez, or maybe as far as Mocha. The porcelain may have been brought to Surat in India from European ships and then carried to the market of Jeddah or Mocha by Indian boats. To conclude, it recently appeared in the news the discovery by the Enigma Shipwrecks project of a shipwreck in the deep waters off the coast of Lebanon. The ship carried, among other commodities from Europe, North Africa, and the East, also Chinese porcelain dating to the 17th century. The ship has been described as Ottoman and on its route from Alexandria to Istanbul. So if this is confirmed, it could be seen as an evidence of the last bit of this trade route, of the trade route of the Ottoman global trade since the 17th century. As a side remark, the discovery has been criticized by Cyprus authorities and by some colleagues claiming that the company has illegally excavated the ship. So I'm finishing. I would like to thank very much all of you for your attention. My thanks goes also to all the institutions and people involved in the project, and also to National Geographic, which will fund our next expedition. We were planning to return to Umm Lajj at the end of March, but the field work has been delayed hopefully to next autumn. So I leave the floor to Laurence, maybe while you can still watch some images from the site. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and thank you for the video that we will have going during the Q&A session. So thank you for this presentation. That was fascinating. I understand that you're, of course, impatient to go back on site. Mm-hmm. So we have a few questions for you. The first one by an anonymous attendee who asked what was inside the jar, if maybe you had the chance to do some residue analysis or you found something inside?
No, we didn't do analysis yet. Probably there was nothing inside. Our first interpretation is that, preliminary interpretation is that these jars were carried empty as mass products for the market, the Egyptian market. So we think that there is nothing inside, but of course, when we will go back next time, we will sample sediment inside, outside the vessels.
Hernando Ombao asked if, based on the items recovered, like by example the kulal, what inference can one make regarding trading between the western coast of Saudi Arabia and Mecca, Riyadh, and Eastern Province? And he asked as well what were the purposes of this kulal.
The purposes, yeah, they were used for to contain liquids inside, so water or other liquids. There is a lot to discuss about the purposes of this market, because as I said in the presentation, these jars were also produced in Egypt. So maybe the reason why they were imported from the southern part of the Red Sea, from basically they were produced near these main ports of Jeddah and Mocha. So there was probably a mass production of these jars that were of daily use in Egypt and the Ottoman Empire and everywhere in the Middle East. So we think, we had discussion about this with Elisa, the student who did the master thesis on this topic, and we thought that was a way to fill the ship on the return back to Egypt. So even if it was not a specific products from the south, because it was available also in Egypt, it was within a system of a mass production, a mass market, a market of mass production, basically. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have two people asking about the bones that you show. You show a picture with bones, as you said, it was from food, and people ask if you know the species of.
No, but because we only found very few, those that are in the photograph, so small mammals and chicken, but yeah, small mammals, maybe a sheep and chicken. But yeah, the first 2 seasons we really focus more on the surface surveys and on the jars mound. So yeah.
Someone asked how the finding of the shipwreck changed some part of the history that was unknown before.
Yes, it changes in the sense that we have a very little information in terms of historical accounts. In this time, Europeans didn't get into the Red Sea, so they didn't. So basically, we don't have historical accounts from European. Very few informations from European sources. We have information from Ottoman archives, but are like archives, so just short data. And what I think is mostly interesting is that we have an internal trade in the Red Sea that is not known. It was not known before. So these shipwrecks are important, especially for this, for giving us an idea and a sense of what was the internal trade in the Red Sea. We usually study the Red Sea since antiquities in the perspective as a sea, as a corridor that connects the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, while there is very much going on inside the Red Sea and between the different regions of the Red Sea. So it stimulates more discussion about the interaction among Red Sea countries. And we, especially in the European perspective, we're used to see the Red Sea as a connection for us, for the Mediterranean and the East, while this shipwrecks gives us the opportunity to focus more on the internal and regional trade, which existed since the Bronze Age and even before.
Yeah. Sorry, the questions are, I take them more or less in the order. It's difficult to categorize them. A question from Volker Fahrenkamp who asked if it's common that jars become cemented like this.
Is because of the calcium carbonates which develops in these warm waters. So it's a natural effect of the deposition, post-depositional process of these materials. And this is the reason why also we can find many shipwrecks in the Red Sea, because they get covered quite quickly with the corals, with the carbonates and so on. So yeah, it's very rare to find the wooden remains of shipwrecks in the Red Sea.
And did you notice when you were on site if this wreck has been looted before?
We believe so, because of the large jars that show in the middle of the ship. It looks that they have been, some of them, maybe not many, but some of them might have been looted. Yeah, because we saw them in fragments, and the fracture seems to be also relatively recent. Yeah. But since the shipwreck has been the presence of the shipwreck has been communicated to the ministry, the area is not accessible to anyone except a researcher. So it was at the beginning of the looting activities were at the very beginning, I think, of the discovery. Yes.
And now, is there any plan to preserve with the new Red Sea project being under?
Yeah, we didn't start excavation because we wanted to be sure that there were preservation facilities on land. So we are negotiating this with the ministry, of course. We are talking about this with the ministry in a way that we can also start to bring some materials from shipwreck and excavate some test trench and study the materials outside of the water. So it will be with the following programs.
So we still have a lot of questions. Marie-Laure Boulot asking how many shipwrecks are in the Red Sea? No, we probably...
No, ancient shipwreck, not many that we know. We have these three from the 18th century, maybe a couple more from this period. Then some Roman wrecks found around Jeddah by German team. And then one late Roman shipwreck in Asarca, in front of the Asarca Island in Eritrea. Something in the late Roman shipwreck also in the Aqaba Gulf, I think, and in the southern coast of Egypt near Berenike, around Berenike and Qusair also Roman shipwrecks. But yeah, there are very few. There are some publications summarizing all the findings that have been. But in general, in the Indian Ocean, we have very, very few ancient shipwrecks recorded so far. Yeah.
Oh, and someone asking about that. If what is the oldest one found in the Red Sea?
In the Red Sea, it should be the Zabagar shipwreck in Egypt. It's a shipwreck with the dresser to for Roman amphoras. So dating to the imperial period, to the early imperial period. So I think this should be the oldest one found underwater. Then we have remains of ships dating back to the Bronze Age in the Red Sea, on the Red Sea coast. But yeah, underwater, I think is the 1st century AD, the most ancient. But that shipwreck we only have the cargo survived, not the wooden part.
Francesca Benzoni asking if there is a fair bit of coral recruitment happening in the jars, but all colony size is small. Has sediment been substantially removed since the time of the discovery?
I didn't get it, sorry.
So it's a coral person, a coral specialist from Kaust, Professor Francesca Benzoni, who asked if on your picture, when we see the jars, if the sediment has been substantially removed at that time for the picture, like, or if it's the colony size, because she noticed that the colony size of the coral.
No, we just brush the surface, which the surface of the jars that were covered with the very thin sandy sediments, carbonate sediments, and but we didn't remove the corals, the soft corals that were within the mound. Of course, we just cleaned the surface of the jars to show the decoration. But yeah, there were many soft corals around, and we left them there, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, I think Francesca was surprised that there were not maybe more corals, or it's the
No, it was like this. No, we didn't.
Okay, so it's not.
Actually, the soft corals created a little bit of disturbance for the photographs. So we have some spots in the orthorectified image where we don't see very well the jars because there were soft corals moving and the fishes as well.
Yeah. So a question, and yes, Francesca says on the chat that yes, soft corals are always a nuisance. So the next question is by Anatoly Anisimov. He asked if you could identify any human remains.
No, not so far. Yeah. No, because we didn't excavate, so
and nothing on the surface.
We might expect to find. So we are very far from the coast there, so 16 miles. So I doubt that someone survived on that ship, unfortunately.
Yeah. So someone asked a question. We're traveling far. So from the shipwreck, is there any finding? So it's Arif Janduto who asked if there is any finding that relates the trading between VOC, Dutch East Indian Company, based in Jakarta and Jeddah.
Yes, we doubt. We don't know if the porcelain was carried by Dutch Indian companies stopping, of course, in Indonesia and then India and to Jeddah, or if the porcelain was carried until Surat and then from Surat to Jeddah would arrive with the Indian boats. So both scenarios are possible. Either a direct connection of Deutsche Indian, East Indian Company and Jeddah, or through the intermediary of merchant Indian ships. And I think in the different periods, maybe things changed. So we can have both options for different phases of this trade.
And sorry, maybe I should have asked this before, but someone asking technical question, like how long is the debris trail on the ship? The debris.
The extension goes, it's slightly more, I said that 36 meters in length, the wooden remains, and roughly it corresponds to the extension of the archaeological area. while I said 9 meters the width, but archaeological materials were also a bit more on the side, where maybe extending for 12, 13 meters in width, so north-south, yes, and 37 east-west, more or less.
Okay. We have, I think, two questions related to the trade with Africa. If what do we know? Is there anything related with trade with the African coast?
We don't have many evidence so far for the Umm Lajj shipwreck, because we didn't do the sediment analysis. But some of the organic materials may have come from I think the question is about the southern part of Africa, East Africa, right? Not Egypt, because when I meant the trade in 3 continents, I mean North Africa, Asia, and Europe. But anyway, so yeah, specifically from East Africa, I'm not sure. There might be incense coming both from Hadramaut and East Africa. And then it's interesting the shape of one of the jars that I show, which looks very much like the Jabana African jugs for coffee. So, but we don't know if they come from there or from the Tihama coast of Yemen, maybe indirectly from Africa. But they are very typical of the northern Horn of Africa production.
About survey techniques, someone asked if you used any modern technology like sensors to locate the shipwreck, and related question, asked if there would be enough sufficient nails and metal items that we could find other shipwrecks through magnetometer survey.
Yeah, it's possible, yes. In our case, we didn't use any of this instrument because the shipwreck was, the location of the shipwreck was known. So we decided instead of surveying we had a huge area to survey, but we decided only to focus on this one. So for now, we didn't do any, we didn't use any of these instruments. But yeah, the quantity of metals, I think, might be sufficient for, I mean, yeah.
For magnetometer. One question from Frank Malone and Brian Hessian, and I'm not surprised they have the same question. That is, so the next step is it's to excavate. Is there a plan to excavate, and what's the strategy?
Yeah, yes, it will be good. Of course, the amount of jars will stay there, so it cannot be moved. We will continue to study the jars to try to answer to more questions about the cargo of jars. We want to sample the sediment. We might start with test trenches. But as I said before, we really need to make sure that we have conservation facilities on land in order to proceed with the excavation. Yeah, then it would be good to do a detailed study of the ship architecture, because basically this is one of the big questions. What type of ships were those? What type of architecture? We know very little from the Sadana and the Sharm. The Sharm, we only have this draft that I show, and we don't have a plan for a complete plan for the Sadana wreck. So it would be very, very good to do. And I think the potential is there to have a very proper study of the ship architecture and to be able to virtually reconstruct the ship.
And from your experience and your knowledge, would you say that, so it's a question from Abdullah Al-Arifi, do you consider that the preservation of this ship in the Red Sea, so the preservation in the Red Sea, is it poor or good or ideal compared to other seas or oceans? How is the
in terms of environmental conditions? In terms of environmental conditions?
Environmental for the preservation of the, yes.
I think, yeah, it's quite good as far as it's protected from divers, and but there are not so many, so I think, yeah, it's quite good.
It's quite good, very good. So thank you very much. I think I've been through most, you answered to most of the questions. It is it was really fascinating. It was a great opportunity for our audience to hear about this joint project between the Saudi Commission for National Heritage and your university in Naples, in Italy. Thank you, everybody, for attending. The next seminar, the next webinar will be in 2 weeks. And we will welcome Professor Olivier Dutour. Professor Dutour is famous for his tremendous contribution to the development of biological anthropology, paleopathology, and paleoepidemiology. So he will give a presentation about epidemics in the history of human societies. This is, of course, a very timely topic, so I hope you'll be there in 2 weeks. And meanwhile, stay safe and continue practicing indoor culture. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.